This is Debt Free in 30, where every week we take 30 minutes and get practical advice from industry experts about personal finance and living debt-free. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
Before I have a guest on the show, I arrange an introductory phone call with them so I can explain what the show is about and so we can pick a topic to discuss. So I did that, and today's guest said he would be out of town and it would be easier for him to phone me. So I said fine, and he called me, and I asked where he was calling from, and he said Paris. And I said, oh, that's cool. I live close to there. I got an office in Brantford. It's only a few minutes away. And he said, oh, Paris, France. And I said, well, what are you doing there? And he said he was working. And I said, but I thought you were like a financial guy. And he said, yeah, I'm working. I'm also an opera singer. So today, for the first time ever, we're going to talk money with an opera singer who I'm pleased to report jumped on a plane and is now sitting in my office here in downtown Toronto. So let's get started. Who are you? And other than being an opera singer, what do you do?
Other than being an opera singer, I'm Chris Enns, and I'm an opera singer, and I split my time kind of between the opera stage and financial planning. So advice-only financial planning, specifically for people like me, for creatives, for people that are kind of outside the norm a little bit, whose finances or way they think about money might seem a little bit different. But I'm Canadian. I grew up in Manitoba on a farm out there. So farm boy,
opera singer, financial guy. So
classic track.
That's right. I've never had that exact person on this show.
It's strange that you haven't found somebody.
I know.
You know? We're everywhere.
So this is cool. And I was going to get Chris to sing the theme song in opera, but we don't actually have a theme song. So next episode, that's what we're going to do.
I'll work on it. Yeah.
So tell us the story then, because I don't have a lot of farming, opera, singing, financial guys. So I know you've got your level 1 certification in financial planning from FPSC, which is, of course, the Financial Planning Standards Council, and you're working towards your designation as a certified financial planner. We've had a number of CFPs on the show in the past, Sandy Martin and others. But obviously, you're also working as an opera singer. So tell me the story. How did these two things come together?
So opera singing is my background, and I started taking school, kind of going for school for opera singing. Oh, yikes. Never count the years, right? It's always it always feels like, I want to say 10 years, but I know I've been in Toronto for 10 years, and I was studying before that, so that's not the answer, but for a long time. And so I did my undergrad and my master's work in opera, and was nothing to do with money. I didn't even hate thinking about money. I just didn't. Like many people in the creative sphere, I avoided thinking about money as much as possible. And so I only started thinking about money when I started making mistakes. And, some of them you could kind of sweep under the rug for a little while, but eventually the mistakes piled up.
They come back and get you.
They really do. And so they kind of got to a point where I really had to look at the monster under the bed and actually face those things. And the big surprise for me was that these basics, because so many of the words, especially for artistic people, are, oh, you're just not good at money, or you just don't think that way. And you get really used to this idea that not only will you never have any money, but you're just not responsible for thinking about the financial side because it's not for you. It's not something that you not need to worry about, but it's your brain isn't working. It doesn't work that way. And I found that when I started facing it, it was the exact opposite, that found learning the basics was really empowering, and getting a sense of my basic cash flow and starting to pay off my tax debt, that was the thing that kind of broke the camel's back, was really something I could do, and something that I could take over this thing that was really scary for me and make it something that was in my control, and that I could actually, drive the boat.
Well, and that's why I wanted to have you on the show, because I think you're an example of someone who's, I guess the word today is the gig economy,
yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So you don't have a standard 9-to-5 job at the big corporation that you will be there for the next 30 years. You're not going to get, benefits and a pension and all the rest of it. So you're in Paris for a couple of months. You're back here. You're going back out on the road, whatever. So, there's obviously a lot of specific challenges you face in that environment.
Of course.
You mentioned taxes. That's an obvious one. So what are the challenges that someone who, like, both in the gig economy, but also someone who is, a creative, because I guess there's different sides of our brains, right? And so
there's at least two of them that they tell us about.
That's right. And so the I love spreadsheet side is different than the artistic, I'm good at music and art and that sort of side. So what specific challenges do you see in your world, either on the creative side or the gig economy, unstable employment, sporadic employment side, when it comes comes to money?
So there's a couple of things on the practical side that I think that anybody who has multiple income streams or works in the gig economy or balances a couple of careers have is one, unpredictable income streams. And that can come in a whole bunch of different phases. Income streams is interesting because you put it under one big umbrella like variable income, but variable income can look so different for different businesses.
That's why they call it variable.
Exactly. But I can't explain opera. We often book 2 years in advance or a year in advance. So that's different than working with clients, my other side, where you're kind of bringing people in and the cash flow looks totally different. And so you put it under one spectrum, but that's really practical. The idea of dealing with taxes, the idea of, running a small business, even if you're not aware you're running a small business. So business inflows and managing that and separating that out from your personal inflows and just kind of the alchemy of that. But I think those are the practical kind of things that we all have to deal with. On the creative side, and for lots of, I deem the word sometimes money misfits, which is kind of a bigger umbrella for people that just don't feel like they've been part of the financial conversation. And I think that one of the biggest issues that they face is a communications problem. They don't connect to the language that the language of money and the way we talk about money in the financial sphere or just generally. They just don't connect to that. They don't connect to the acronyms. They don't connect to the spreadsheets, but they don't necessarily also connect to some of the underlying words like wealth and the idea that I need to get as much money as possible. Lots of creative people just don't think about their finances that way. And so if you're always framing things through the accumulation of wealth, as we often do in the financial sphere, that's going to say, well, that's not for me. If that's what that is, if it's all about investments and making as much money as possible, I've made different decisions in my life, but it's not. Money is just a tool that we use to build the lives we want. And so the communication issue is a big part of it.
And why is that? So, I understand, you speak English, I speak French, we're talking a different language, you're opera, I'm rock and roll kind of a thing. I get that. Is that what it is? We're just using different words, or is it something deeper than that?
I think that your opera rock and roll thing is like a metaphor that I really like. In the arts, we're telling the same
and
stories.
I look like a rock and roll guy, don't I? Like, come on, there's nobody more rock and roll than me. That's absolutely right. So what is it then?
I think that's one of the interesting problems to solve, because, and I don't think that we're trying to solve it in the financial sphere enough. I think that too often we say the same words over and over and then say, if you don't understand this, you have to change. And people hear this, whether it's being said or not, and it is being said sometimes, you're dumb if you don't understand this. You're bad at money if you don't understand this.
So is there an example of a word that is I know in my world, I never use the word creditor when I'm talking to people.
Yeah.
Because if I ask someone on the street, what's the difference between a creditor and a debtor?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, well, a creditor is someone you owe money to. A debtor is you're the guy who owes the money. But
For sure.
I never use those words. I just say, tell me about the people you owe money to.
Interesting.
Which is better than saying the word creditor.
100%.
So it's making it in simple, easy to understand language. Is that what you're talking about, or is it something
not only that? I
more
think
than
that's
that?
part of it. I think it's also about just trying to. What I tell people a lot is that in order to be good at your money, you don't have to change everything about who you are. You are, especially I work with people that are incredible at their crafts. They're dancers, they're writers, they're singers, and they are incredible at something. They know how to develop a technique to be great at something. What they don't know is how to develop a financial technique. And so what I talk to them about is saying, okay, especially I love working with singers because I understand that technique so well. I can express in that words being like, this is what you do here, it's the same in money. This is what you do here, it's the same in money. And when I'm talking to, especially for, storytellers, which is a big umbrella of all kinds of people who are communicators and trying to communicate things and trying to say, okay, what's the most important thing? It's not the words and the grammar, it's knowing what story you're telling. And to making sure when I work with clients, we're always working first from a point of, what are you trying to do? What is your money for? Before we're trying to solve debt problems, before we're trying to figure out retirement, we're spending a lot of time talking about intention. And this is something we do in the financial industry all the time. I'm not making, this is not, a revolutionary idea from Chris, but making sure that people are grounding that sense in themselves and relating, saying, okay, this is just like your technique. This is just like something you do well already. And this is how we're going to do it. And then we'll add a spreadsheet versus starting with the stuff that they're not good at and getting overwhelmed by that. We add the acronyms to what you want. We add finance to the personal, not the personal to the finance. And I think that's what That's what kind of I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
you're not trying to fit a square peg into a round hole either, I
No.
guess. So now your website, it's called ragstoreasonable.com, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And like you just said, you help, creatives and, as you call them, money misfits.
Yeah.
So how do you define a money misfit then? What does that word mean to you?
Really is around this communication thing. It's just people that feel left out of that general financial conversation for whatever reason, whether it's, they Googled how to make a budget and the first line was, take your income and divide it by, and they go,
What?
I don't
what
know
does that
how
even
much
mean?
income I'm going to make.
Yep.
So whether it's that or they, I remember the first time that I went into a bank, and I wanted to invest in my TFSA. I was feeling really confident. I was starting to get control of my money. And the woman across the desk, wanted me to invest my tax fund, the money that I had set aside for taxes for the year. And she was like, oh, just no, but you've got $6,000 here. You could put that into your TFSA as well. And I was like, I don't think I didn't have the confidence yet. And I was like, I don't think that's what I should be doing. I'm not saying it as a fault, although I do think the financial industry should try harder to find new ways to communicate with whoever's in front of them, but they just have not necessarily clicked with what's being put out there. So trying to create a space for the people on the outside that aren't engaged in the general financial conversation. They're not asking the questions that everybody else is asking, and they don't have a place to go for support. And so trying to create a place for people like that to come and start a conversation.
So you're saying that banks and maybe traditional financial planners start with the tool. Well, this is a TFSA, this is a budget, and we try to ram it down your throats rather than the other way around. And I guess this is the difference that you see dealing with, creatives or, money misfits.
It's a big part of it.
Start with the person.
Yes.
What language do you speak? What do you understand? And then work from there. So really what you're saying is you got to start with, you didn't use this word, but, the goal, the plan, something like that. Is that really what you're saying?
I think that's a big part of it. I think that's such a great this is what I found in the advice-only financial planning world, is that's the kind of financial planning that a lot of people are doing for a lot of different voices. And so, people are doing it for engineers and doctors. And, I like working with engineers and doctors. I don't speak their language as well.
Yeah.
I always have a hard time working with engineers because I'm more likely to talk about how do you feel about this and how are you connecting to this and how does this. I'm more of a feelings, emotions guy. I care about that, and they want to make sure that third decimal place is in the right place, and I don't care about the third decimal place.
It's not your thing.
So there's places where I don't speak the language right either. I think that so much of the financial industry is product driven, right?
Yeah.
And
that's
so,
where they make all their money.
And so that's a big problem.
So what types of careers do you see that, you're helping people with? So, obviously you probably got a few opera singer clients,
for sure.
but what are some of the other, non-traditional careers, non-traditional job paths that you're helping people with?
Lots of actors. I've been involved in a partnership with Actra Toronto for the last year. And so there's been lots of actors and people in the film industry, because it's not just the acting side.
Oh, there's
the tech side, anybody who's connected to that, the stunt side, that whole world. I work with some fitness professionals who have, not necessarily that creative sphere, but their income, it's more client-based. I work with some more self-employed client-based people that run, online businesses. This is kind of the connections but it's amazing how putting that title Money Misfit opened up to a lot more people, writers, dancers.
And there are so many more people who just don't have a traditional job. It's
what is a traditional
what
job?
Is a traditional job? Yeah, that's a very, very good question. They are few and far between. Like the number of people out there in the world who are going to be at the same job for 30 years, are going to move through the ranks and have a pension when they are done is, okay, I don't know, 5% of the economy. It's maybe if you've got a government job or something, and that would be about it. So what then is the approach for somebody who has either multiple streams of income or more likely many different streams of income? So all those people you just talked about, anybody in the entertainment business, actors, and you're right, in this office, we're here at Young and King, and for people who are watching, we're using a different room than we've used before, just trying that out. But here at Young and King, we get a lot of people who are exactly what you described. I didn't realize how many different layers to the entertainment industry there were. Because we all see the actors. but they're a small percentage of all the different people, the technical people and writing and all the rest of it. So what is your advice for people in that world who I'm going to be working on a project for 2 months and then I'm going to be off for 2 months and then I'll get another one and back and forth, back and forth. You can't do traditional budgeting where every 2 weeks you do this. Yeah. So what kind of big picture advice do you give people with very sporadic or untraditional sources of income?
Yeah, it's harder.
Yeah.
The truth is it's harder.
And maybe that's the simple answer. It's harder.
I think it is. It seems unhelpful, but at the same time, it is helpful for a lot of people to know that they're not missing something. You're not bad at your money. This is something I tell to lots of people. You know why this feels hard? Because it is hard.
Yeah.
And because there's a lot of language around finances, which is just make a budget. Mm-hmm. Just sit down and make a budget. Like it's a really easy thing. And it's not easy when you have normal income either.
Yep.
It's a difficult process that people whitewash over far too quickly. But when your income is variable, it's even harder.
Yep.
I think for me, what I always start working on with clients here, not only that, making sure you're really set in what you want, but the second big question that we deal with is not income, it's expenses. It's the better you can know your expenses, the more you can understand your income side. You can't start budgeting when you're variable income from an income perspective. I know that the conventional advice often for self-employed people is take your last 2 years and divide that by 12 and use that as a starting number. If your business works that way and it's pretty consistent, great. If you work in the film industry, maybe you were on a big show last year, but you don't have any potential work this year, don't do that unless you have a reason to do that. Start from a place of what do you need?
So I look at my expenses and I see, well, my rent and my grocery, it costs $2,000 a month to live. And then what do I then do with that information?
For sure. So what I work with people, one of the biggest things that I work with people is coming up with a cash flow system. And that involves building a system so that you're paying yourself a salary. And it's basically, you've got an extra step, you know, you don't get a regular salary. You make a system so that you're paying yourself a regular salary. There's no just in this sentence because it takes some time. But the biggest piece of that puzzle is, what would you need to pay yourself? What would you need to pay yourself to make that work? A lot of the work we do there too is separating out business and personal expenses. So you can start seeing lots of sole proprietors don't see any separation between who they are personally and who they are as their business, and start putting those in two different piles. So you can start to make a structure so that when money comes in, whether it's a big month or a low month, you can start to smooth that out and make it so you're getting the same amount that hits your personal account every month.
So let me see if I understand what you're saying here then. So I've decided to go into acting. I'm going to give up this whole accounting thing.
I think you're a natural.
Oh yeah, I'll be great at it. And singing too. You all want to hear me sing, that's for sure. So I get a job working on that big show on at the Ed Mirvish Theater, whatever that show is, and I'm gonna be on it for 3 months.
Great.
Okay, and so I'm gonna make, I don't know how much you make on the show, but I'm gonna make good money.
Yeah.
And then for a couple months after that, I'll take a break, I guess, and then get the next gig and whatever. So I know that it's gonna cost me a couple of grand a month to live because I'm an actor now, so I'm bunking with 4 other actors and keeping my costs down and all the rest of it. So I assume what I need to do is take the $6,000 a month I'm making.
Yeah.
And put it into an account because each $6,000 I make, I know buys me 3 months of runway.
It does and it doesn't, right? Because we're making gross instead of net.
Okay.
So we've got another layer. So when $6,000 comes in, this is what I'll set up with my clients. $6,000 comes in. And we're breaking it up into 3 pieces. We're putting 25% away into a tax account. We're putting 25% away into a business account because you need to spend a certain amount of every dollar to make the next dollar. And then we're putting 50% into your personal account.
So as an actor, what expenses am I going to have?
This is one of the most frustrating things is that, especially as an opera singer, I'll speak to
Let's say that. Let's say I'm going to go into opera.
Just because I know the expenses really well and because it's a really high input business. When I want to do an audition as an opera singer, 9 times, I shouldn't say 9 times out of 10. Often it's in New York. I have to fly myself down there. I have to put myself up. I need to hire a pianist to get to play for me for that audition. So I can be putting out between $500 and $800 to do an audition that that 100 other people are going to.
So I fly to New York, and how long is the audition? Like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour?
If they like you.
If they like you, okay.
5 minutes if they don't.
If they don't. So I phone around, find someone to play the piano for me. I guess I probably have to learn the music.
Yeah, all that prep work you don't get paid for.
Yeah, unless it's some opera I've done 15 times.
Yeah.
And I've never done an opera, so I guess I'm going to have to learn
You're
it.
probably going to need to train a little bit.
So I may go on, I will go on many auditions.
Voice lessons, because you need to get ready.
Voice lessons.
You need to work with a language coach as well. Opera's not in English. Or some opera is in English.
Should do it in
Most
English,
of opera is in Italian, French, German, Russian, Spanish. You need to learn that. You need to get that worked. You need to be going to school. You need to be networking with people. You need to go on a ton of auditions that you won't get, because this is just the same as networking in business. You don't get the first job that you go for.
Any salesperson has to make many pitches to get one sale. And so when you're singing in a French or Italian opera, do you actually understand what you're saying?
You have to understand what you're saying at a certain level. So what they teach us to do is, even if you're not fluent, they teach us how to cheat. So you take diction courses, and we break down the language into the International Phonetic Alphabet so that you can learn the sounds. And then you translate every word, and you know, even if you don't speak French or you don't speak German, you know this German, and you know what you're expressing.
Right.
It's, if you want the kind of analogy that I make with my clients all the time, this is exactly like finances. You don't need to figure out the whole language. You need to figure out the sentence that you know how to speak.
Yep.
So it's like, this is the language that's in front of you. You need to know every acronym. You don't need to know every investing strategy. You need to understand your investing strategy. You understand the RSP that you have. That's all. You need to understand why you're doing that. That makes you good at money.
Gotcha. Now, you hit on a key area, which was taxes.
Yeah.
And so what you said was, so I'm making $6,000 at this show I'm doing.
Yeah.
And it only cost me $2,000 a month to live, but I didn't really make $6,000 because at the end of the year when I file my taxes, I'm going to owe money. So your strategy for dealing with that is to
right off the top, right away,
literally have a separate account, and that's where I dump it into.
Often in a separate bank.
So it's totally out, so I can't touch it. Would you ever recommend to a client, just send the money to Revenue Canada?
Some people do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in effect, you're making installments.
Some people do. Some people, I've had clients just kind of sending it straight there all the time. It depends on the personality. Some people, if they see that money in the account, they're going to rate it. So you put it in a separate bank. Some people don't want to. I think the majority of people want to spend as little time thinking about their money as possible.
Yeah, and I understand I don't want to be giving Revenue Canada money early, and if I work 6 months and then I don't work 6 months, then maybe I don't owe as much in taxes. So
this is why I don't get along with the engineers, because in my mind I say I don't really care about giving money to the taxes early if it's going to mean that you don't have tax debt come tax time.
Yeah.
I think that cost, I think it's something you need to know about, but I think that can be worth it.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of stress about that.
I totally agree. And anybody who's self-employed, and I'm much more likely to be working with people who are in the construction industry or something.
Yeah, for sure.
So very busy in the summer, not so busy in the winter. And I say to them, look, that over the course of the year you're going to make this much. That puts you in this tax bracket. So out of every dollar you make, this is how much you're going to have to give to the government. So why not every pay you get during the summer, if you're self-employed and it's not being withheld at source, just send it right to the government.
Yep.
And then it's gone. And if you overpay, they'll give it back to you. And yes, I understand if you put it in your own TFSA, you could earn interest on it at 0.5%, and you'd have an extra $50 at the end of the year. But this way, nothing can go wrong. So I'm a big believer about that. So, okay, let's think this through here. So, obviously I'm a chartered accountant, a CPA, which is the most traditional kind of job there is. Since graduating from university, I was thinking about this the other day, which was like 32 years ago.
Yeah.
Of course, I was a child prodigy, graduated at the age of 7. I've had exactly 3 jobs.
Okay.
3 jobs. I was at KPMG for 10 years, big accounting firm. Then I spent less than 2 years at PwC. And I said, forget this, and then started Hoyes Michaelis, which was about 20 years ago. So I have had 0 firsthand experience at juggling, multiple jobs and income streams and all the rest of it. So number 1, is it stressful? And number 2, is it, kind of better than a traditional job? Because you've certainly got lots of stuff going on. Or is it, oh no, everybody, if they had a choice, would love to be an accountant working at the same big accounting firm for 20 years?
I think, yes, it's stressful, but I don't think that necessarily means that it's bad. It's like anything else. There's so much nuance in what you want your working life to be. I think that it's very interesting right now. there's a couple of things happening. I read something the other day that was just talking about how much we romanticize this idea of working for yourself a lot. And so that's definitely a factor. Oh, freedom. You can do whatever you want. You can work from home in your pajamas every day, the whole day, because you don't have set boundaries on yourself, and that's really difficult. And enforcing that structure on yourself is really hard. It's not as simple as that. And but at the same time, it's not as simple as saying 9 to 5 or stable employment or whatever that looks like is the answer. It's the preferable for most people. I think that people are really thinking about what they want from their work. I think that in the same way that people are rethinking what they want to kind of spend on as far as, wanting to really connect with the rise of socially responsible investing, making more conscious choices about what they want their money to go towards. I think people are thinking a lot about how they want to earn. And I think one of the most important words that is kind of bouncing around is the idea of flexibility. And that's worth a lot. That being said, that doesn't have to be found in a self-employed world or in a multiple income stream world. And often that's not flexible at all. You're just kind of juggling to kind of make ends meet.
So if I said to you, I'm starting this new opera and it's going to run for 10 years. Okay. Like, I don't know, Cats, that was a thing. It wasn't an opera, but it ran for a long time. Or Come From Away will probably be going forever.
Yeah, for sure.
So would you rather be on that show for the next 10 years, you know exactly what you're doing, exactly what show you're doing, you can live in the same place, not change? Or would you say, you know what, I kind of like, 3 months in Paris, couple months in Toronto, 3 months, like what would you pick?
I like the variability. Yeah. That's what I want, but I know artists that would love that kind of stability. It comes with a trade-off. They always come with a trade-off. This is all in finance. Aren't we just talking about trade-offs all the time? I think that what we need to get better at is getting clear about what the trade-off is. Because I think that it's really pitched this idea of like, oh, just do this, just be on your own. Oh, this is so much better than going into that job every day. And it's not that clear. It's getting a clearer sense of what that can look like. The problem is that it looks really different when you're balancing 4 restaurant jobs so that you can audition and maybe get a job, maybe get an acting job, versus balancing 3 kind of things that you own, that you're more in control over and more in control of your shifts. But that's still stressful because you're in charge of kind of bringing in that income and making sure that you're hustling to kind of have things keep the lights on, right?
Yeah, there's pros and cons to each. So
completely.
So okay, this show is called Debt Free in 30. We talk about debt. Yeah. So when someone comes in to see you, one of your opera singing buddies or whatever, and they've, maybe incurred a bunch of debt because I'm going on auditions and doing all this sort of thing, but now I've got, some kind of money coming in. How do you advise someone on how to make a plan to get out of debt when you only know for the next couple of months what your income is going to be? Yeah. You can't project it, months and years forward. Is there any kind of structure you can put to that, or how do you do it?
Completely. And it's something that I work with lots of people with. It's a combination of 2 things. One, stabilizing your cash flow. So it's exactly what we were talking about before. The idea that you need to figure out, a lot of the time, our debt comes from not accounting for the costs that we know about. Sometimes it's a surprise thing. A tree falls on your car, you can only do so much, but you can do things to prepare for auditions, putting away money for business. You can do things to prepare for Christmas. It's not business, but it's the thing that hits you every time.
And I can tell you, December 25th, that's when it's going to be this year. So you can mark it down. So, okay, number 1, stabilize cash flow.
Stabilize cash flow is usually a big reason, but that's really a symptom of the most important thing, which is stop looking at the number. What caused the debt? And your first step is not to pay off this debt. It's to stop more debt from happening. And so it's about looking at the $20,000 of debt, $30,000 of debt isn't the same for everybody. And so it's not just about coming up with a payment plan. It's about trying to figure out how you can restructure your life and restructure the way you do things so that debt doesn't happen again. Because so many people, you must see this all the time, they're caught in the cycle. $1,000, and this is so bad for variable income earners because you have a $10,000 month and you put $9,000 onto the credit card. Amazing. I'm paying off things and you're using it next month again. And so it goes back up, back up, back up. You need to stop the cycle first. So that I would rather, and I tell clients all the time, be like, we're going to pay minimum payments on your credit card for a while we stabilize things. And then we're going to start making payments one way. I would rather $25 goes on your debt over above your minimum payments and doesn't come back than this thing that you're doing
giving
right
$200
now.
and then borrowing $175.
It's so not only from a financial point of view, doesn't it help? It's so demoralizing. It's so hard if you feel so trapped versus slow, steady, sustainable progress. That's the only solution. And that comes from who you are and where that came from more than, the numbers and the interest rates out of that. It's important. But,
so
that's the last step.
you got to stop the bleeding first.
Stop the bleeding
and
first.
then you can work on stabilizing the cash flow. And obviously, as you go through that process, if it turns out, well, I've got $50,000 worth of debt and I have no hope of paying it off, well, that's when you're coming in to see me.
That's when I'm sending people to
yes,
you.
and
exactly.
And it's because that's all you can do. But at least you're realistic about what it is. And people in your line of work, well, I might end up getting on a really big show and I may be able to have all this cleared up in 6 months. So I guess knowing where you stand is critical.
But that hope can be that's a difficult place to be in because people push it and people push it and people push it because
might not be
tomorrow I could get a movie
Yeah.
and I could pay off this debt in one go. But the truth is that people always think that things will change when they get more money. But more money doesn't change behavior. It amplifies current behavior. And so you have to change your habits now. You have to set up an infrastructure now so that's why that $25 debt payment is so important, because then if you get the movie, you can add 2 zeros to that debt payment.
Yeah.
But if that pathway isn't there, you're not paying off your debt. And if you are, you're not taking care of your life. And so you're going to end up at risk for more debt. And at a certain point, the biggest cost of debt in so many people's lives isn't the financial cost. It's the weight that they're carrying on all the time. They're carrying on that shame. They're carrying on
it's
that
up
guilt.
here.
And it's affecting the way they do their jobs. It's affecting the way they live their lives. And sometimes it's just like, go through the consumer proposal now. If you get a great gig, okay.
Pay it off quick then.
Pay it off more quickly. Exactly.
Yeah.
But just start moving this needle forward and stop having the specter looming over every audition. You know what makes you audition really well?
Yeah.
Going into a room and saying, I need to get this, otherwise I'm not going to be able to make my rent next month.
Yeah. Yeah, and you almost for sure won't get it then.
It doesn't help.
It's a karma thing.
It
You got to
really doesn't help.
And I see that in every line of work. That,
Completely.
I've been laid off, and so I'm applying for that job at the accounting firm or the engineering company or the construction company or whatever. If I go in there in a good frame of mind, I get the job.
Exactly.
I've had tons of clients over the years who have been down. They do the proposal, they do the bankruptcy, whatever. They get rid of the debt, and then 3 days later they get a job. And they go, I don't get it. I've been trying for 6 months. Yeah, but you finally took the weight off. So I think that's excellent advice to end it. How can people find you?
You can find me at ragstoreasonable.com. All my information is there about the kind of people I work with, what that work looks like. There's a blog. I'm part of a podcast called Because Money.
And how can they find that?
It's at becausemoney.ca. With
simple.
Sandy Martin and John Robertson. And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Rags to Reasonable. My big focus really is providing accessible one-on-one help. And so I run monthly free office hours, 3 hours of free office hours on my site. You can sign up for those for free. They're all online. My practice is all online, so I can talk to people all around the world. Those are no strings attached. I'm not going to try to talk to you into anything, just for a chance to talk out any things that are on your mind. I also do pay what you can financial planning for lower income people, where I'll subsidize the remainder of what you can't pay. Sometimes there's a bit of a waiting list, but when that can happen, because in my practice, I also donate 10% of everything that people pay to a fund that helps people who can't afford financial planning. So you can find all those details on my site at ragstoreasonable.com.
Excellent. Perfect. Chris, thanks for being here.
Great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
That was awesome. That's our show for today. A transcript for today's show and full show notes, including a link to Chris's website and Twitter profile and everything else, can be found at hoyes.com. That's HOYES.com. Thanks for listening. Until next week, I'm Doug Hoyes. That was Debt Free in 30.